Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Cool Reds for Warm Weather. When I decided on the theme for this tasting a fortnight ago, we were in the grip of a heat wave. It was lovely and warm outside, the sun was shining, and this seemed like a nice idea. This seemed like the way to go. These are three reds I've chosen that can be chilled, that are very nice chilled, and in fact that's not weather dependent. But look at the weather today. It's blowing a gale. It's quite cool outside, and at least it was when I was cycling home this afternoon, raining as well. So anytime somebody wants some rain on their roses, just give me a call and I'll pick a theme for a wine tasting for hot weather, and we'll get a little breeze and some rain. But never mind. Welcome if you've just joined me. Tonight, as I say, we're going to try three red wines that can be successfully chilled, that are tasty when cool. Many years ago, when I started off in the wine business, my very first working day in the wine business was Beaujolais Nouveau Day, 1989. That was my first day working in a wine shop, and apart from the sheer hard work, because we had 4 pallets of Beaujolais Nouveau delivered by lorry just before the shop opened, and it all had to be broken down on the pavement and trolleyed on a sack trolley through to no rain in Kent. Well, that's good. It was raining just now in London. I'd say rain. It was only spitting, really, but it's still not the sort of weather where we want to sit outside and drink a chilled glass of red wine. Never mind, we're indoors. We can drink our chilled glass of red indoors and imagine that it's red, that it's warm. I've worn the most tropical shirt I could find, and hopefully that will bring back the good weather for this weekend. As I was saying about Beaujolais Nouveau, my abiding memory of that day is shifting huge quantities of Beaujolais Nouveau in through a very narrow front door of the shop, all the way to the back of the shop, and it was quite a long shop, and then up the stairs into the stockroom, and then in the course of the day down the stairs again, and pile it out onto the display, serve it to customers, and keep us going throughout the day. I had an inspiring first shop manager who just plied us with endless Beaujolais Nouveau to keep us going through the day, and he kept it in the fridge. And this was my first introduction to chilled red wine, and it seemed really odd at the time. We're drinking a red wine, cold, chilled, why? And it just was really refreshing. It really suited it. And so the first wine we're going to try tonight isn't a Beaujolais. I thought I'd fling in a few left field choices here. Several people have keep it simple, Andy. So keep it simple, but there's the fun in that. So the first wine we're going to try tonight, it's made from the same grape variety as Beaujolais, but this is Timata Gamay Noir. And Gamay is the grape variety of Beaujolais. This example's from Hawke's Bay in New Zealand. Now, it is in common with most of the red wines that we're trying tonight. Hi, Nick. Quite pale in colour, and it's Timata's an interesting outfit. They've been going since 1912, 1896. In fact, they were established 1896 in Hawke's Bay. So much older than the Johnny Come Latelys of Marlborough, like Cloudy Bay and the rest. And they're famous for their Cabernet Merlot blends and their Syrah. But they've got a small planting. It went in 1995 of Gamay Noir that they planted so that they could deliberately make a Kiwi answer to Beaujolais. The way that the wine is made is interesting, because usually with red wines you would take your grapes after harvest and you would crush them, and then you would allow the juice to macerate with the skins, ferment on the skins, so that you extract lots of colour, lots of flavour, lots of tannin, and then when the fermentation is complete you would press the grapes, you would press the juice away from the skins. But in the case of Beaujolais, and in the case of this Gamay, or at least a portion of it, what they do is they ferment the berries whole. So they don't press them, they don't crush them, they just put them in a sealed vat and allow the yeasts on the skins to do their job, to start to break things down, and the berries spontaneously ferment, and you can almost imagine the berries exploding under the burst of carbon dioxide within the skins. And in fact it's called, the technique's called carbonic maceration carbonique, if you've got to be French about it, but my accent's appalling. I apologise to any Franglais who are listening. Hi Cathal. The whole idea of this carbonic maceration is, this whole berry ferment, is that you extract gently perfumed, very characteristic Beaujolais and Gamay, very gently perfumed flavoured wines with sufficient colour but with minimal tannin, and keeping the wines soft and light and juicy. And this is what Tomato have done very successfully with this. So on the nose it's full of red fruits, strawberry, maraschino cherry, bit of raspberry, and there's a sweeter note as well, which I find really attractive, which is kind of, it's a bit like cotton candy. Yeah, and there's a little bit of oak maturation too, which is not so typical for Beaujolais. It's common enough in Cru. If Cru Beaujolais are posh Beaujolais, they're the Beaujolais from the 10 villages that are reckon to be good enough to warrant their own name. So wines like Fleury or Bruy, or Régnier, Moulin-à-Vent. These are the villages that lend their names to the vineyards surrounding them, and the wines are reckoned to be good enough to warrant a cru status rather than simple Beaujolais or Beaujolais Village. And some of those wines will be oak aged. Now, a small portion of this wine is aged. It's only 7 weeks, and it's in what they call seasoned French oak barrels. Read between the lines, that's barrels that have been used at least twice on other wines. But there is a little bit of oak influence there, and that does affect the sort of cotton candy character too. Some of the vanillin that you can smell is from that. The palate is really juicy, fresh, bright acidity, so typical of Gamay. There's a lot of flavour packed in there though. Lots of red fruit, raspberry, a little bit of strawberry. The tannin's there. If you know tannin, it's that sort of grainy, drying feeling that you get around your teeth and gums when you're drinking red wine. and stewed tea, which I find helpful when I'm explaining it to people for the first time. Imagine you're drinking a real builder's brew. That drying sensation around your teeth and gums, that's the tannin in the tea. You get exactly the same substance from the skin, the pips, the stalks of grapes. Now, because of the carbonic maceration, because of this whole berry ferment, there's not that much tannin there. And so what there is quite silky. There's not a lot of tannin to dry out the finish. It's slightly peppery as well, but it's mostly that lovely ripe red fruit. Now, again, these wines are relatively low in alcohol as well as low in tannin. For red wines, what they generally have is slightly higher acidity, so they're brighter, fresher style. In fact, looking at the colour of this, you can see there's less of it in the glass now. We've actually got 1 or 2 rosés on the shelf at work that are almost as dark as this wine is pale, and rosés are kind of the halfway house between red wine and white wine, and the darker the rosé, the closer you are to a red, and vice versa. Yeah, I'm curious as to how well this would work with spicy food. The winery themselves, Temata themselves, recommend it with spicy food. And I think the Kiwis have a lot of what we might call Pacific Rim cuisine, with a lot of Thai and Chinese influences, and maybe that's what they're thinking of. But personally, particularly chilled, I would put this up against grilled fish. The meatier the fish, the better. Sort of salmon, tuna, that sort of thing. But this is actually true of all 3 of the reds, or at least the first 2 reds that we're trying. It's versatile stuff, and it really is very refreshing chilled. It hasn't got the basic principle of chilling red wines is that the more tannin the wine has, the less you really want to serve it chilled. A really tannic red can become quite bitter if you serve it too cool, but it's fun to experiment. You can't really go wrong chilling a red wine. You can't really go wrong chilling a red wine because it will warm up in the glass. And so, Cole's asked a great question here. A few bottles of good Santamor. You wanted to try chilled, you weren't brave enough. Great at room temperature, would I kill them? Yeah, I would experiment with half an hour in the fridge, chill them down to 11 or 9 degrees Celsius if you want to wrap a bottle thermometer around it. But otherwise, you give it half an hour in the fridge, and any character that you lose through chilling the wine will come back as it warms up again. There are certain aroma characteristics that are muted when a wine is chilled, and there are certain aroma characteristics like citrus and stone fruits which tend to show more clearly when the wine is chilled. You go to a certain point, you chill a wine to sort of below 7 degrees, and you're just going to remove almost any aroma characteristic at all. And as a rule of thumb, the worse the white, the colder you serve it. I can think of 1 or 2 whites that should be served maybe a degree above freezing. But the trick with chilling reds is very straightforward. It takes longer to chill a wine down than it does to warm it up again. If you're in a, if you're lucky enough to be in a Parisian cafe and you're watching this and it's nice and warm outside and you've ordered a bottle of Fleury, I can almost promise you that it will come to the table in an ice bucket. And look, what we consider room temperature today, I mean, I don't know what people set their thermostats at home, but 20 degrees, 22 degrees, even 25 degrees is considered room temperature. And really, room temperature 50 years ago, 100 years ago, when these rules were being written, or earlier still, would have been closer to 18 or 19 degrees. You've got a fire going in one corner of the room, but on the other side of the room, it takes a while for that heat to permeate, and that's a winter room temperature. So even the heaviest of reds shouldn't really be served any warmer than about 18 degrees. Once you push over that, you tend to sort of emphasize the stewed fruit character of a wine, and I, for one, find them quite unappealing. With sort of heavy, full-bodied wines, they can become more port-like, and they don't show off their complexity at their best. So temperature is quite important, but as I say, better to start off too cold and then warm the wine in your hand. Yes, I know there's a stem, and we hold the glass by the stem to avoid warming the wine, but needs must. And if the wine is too cold and you want to warm it up, then your hand will do the job perfectly well. And it's interesting actually to try a wine at different temperatures and see how different notes show. Tasting like a strawberry rosé. Well, yeah, I think there's a lot of red fruit to this, Nick. I quite agree. I mean, on the nose, I'm getting more strawberry, more raspberry all the time, and a little bit of that sort of sweet caramel cum cotton candy character. It's but it's not an artificial nose. I think sometimes, particularly with inexpensive Beaujolais, you can get a kind of confected fruit character, which is more like boiled sweets, whereas this has got a much more natural fresh fruit character, which I really quite like. No, I really do. I really do like this. I was curious, I have to admit, when our buyer, because we used to stock wines from Tomato, like Texcoco, and various other iconic wines that they produce. Massive Cabernet Merlot blends, typical of the Hawke's Bay region, beautiful Syrahs, like I say, iconic wines, 35, 40 pounds a bottle. And then this Gamay Noir arrives, and I'm thinking, well, that's interesting, because what's New Zealand famous for? Really, it's famous for Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Noir from Central Otago, and then if you start to dig beneath the surface a bit more, you get these iconic reds from Hawke's Bay as well, and one or two other specialities. But really, Gamay Noir, it's unusual. It's Tomato were the first guys to plant Gamay in New Zealand, and that was only in 1995. So I don't imagine there's an awful lot of Gamay planted throughout New Zealand. So it's interesting stuff. Nick's gone for another glass, has he? So he obviously approved. That's brilliant. Don't mind me, Nick, but I'm actually going to move on to the next wine. Don't bolt it, whatever you do. It's too nice to rush through. So the next wine we're going to try is a German Pinot Noir. This is Johann Wolf Pinot Noir, and this is from one of my favourite German producers, people might be more familiar with the Rieslings of Dr. Leusen, or Leusen. I always struggle to pronounce that correctly, and believe it or not, I've actually stayed there, so I should I should be able to pronounce it. Ernst, or Ernie Leusen, the doctor in the name, is he's a genuine doctor. He has the further degree, but his doctorate is not in winemaking. He's a fascinating chap. His doctorate and his first love is in archaeology. And having studied archaeology and qualified with his PhD and everything, he found himself having to rescue the family winery in the Moselle, and they had the most amazing vineyard holdings, but a rather rundown winery and some rather nondescript wines. And he rescued the family business and restored the winery, and he has an incredible reputation now for his Rieslings. Absolutely wonderful wines. But in the 1990s, he was able to purchase an outfit called Villa Wolf in the Pfalz, or the Palatinate. And the Pfalz is an area bordering the Rhine, sheltered by mountains that form what we call a rain shadow. So the rainfall in the Pfalz is actually about a quarter of the annual rainfall in the Moselle, for example. Much, much lower. And it's just north of Alsace. Holidaymakers to the Pfalz call it Germany's Tuscany. It's warm enough to ripen apricots in the Pfalz. They grow quite exotic fruits, lemons as well. It's not the sort of microclimate you would naturally associate with German wines, perhaps. And the Rieslings that they produce in the Pfalz are a very, very different character to the Rieslings that they produce in, say, the Moselle, or even in the Rheingau, which is a warmer area than the Moselle. So this is south of both of them. It's not as far south as Baden, where some really great Pinot Noirs, Spätburgunder is the name of the grape in Germany, but Pinot Noir to you and me. And we stock a couple of wines from Baden, which are a little heavier, fuller bodied than this wine from Johann Wolf, or Villa Wolf. Johann Wolf is the label that they're selling it to us under. But the Pfalz is as famous for its red wines as for its whites. Curious fact, a third of Germany's wine production is red. Most people look at German wine, or consider German wine, as being white, as being sweet, and coming in those traditional flute bottles, the tall slim bottles. But as I say, a third is red, and an awful lot of that is Pinot Noir. There are other grapes like Dornfelder Grown, but Pinot Noir is the majority red grape now in Germany. Accounts for about 65–70% of German red grape plantings. And of course, an awful lot of German Riesling is dry. It's just that in the aftermath of the Second World War, during the Allied occupation, they discovered that the American and English occupying troops had a bit of a sweet tooth, and so they created a sweeter style of wine by using what they called Suss Reserve, concentrated grape juice, boiled down grape juice, to sweeten the finished wine. And they created the style that we became, we knew and loved up until the 80s, at any rate, knew as Liebfraumilch. And that has, certainly for my generation, has tarnished the reputation of German wines. I find that my younger customers don't come to the table with the same prejudices, if you like, against German wine, and a more open mind. You know, they maybe tried a sweet Riesling, but they're equally likely to have tried a dry Riesling, perhaps thanks to the Australians. But we're not talking about Riesling, we're talking about Pinot Noir here. And this is Pinot Noir grown on it's mostly limestone soils. The Pfalz is not. It's a very different wine region to perhaps what we picture as the German wine regions looking. You know, you've got these vertiginous, really steep sloped vineyards of the Moselle and the Rheingau, and even when you get down to Baden, you've got vineyards on mountains like the Drakensberg, the Dragon's Mountain. It all sounds very Tolkien. But these are steep slope vineyards, often slate or granite based soils, whereas the Pfalz is a gentler sloping wine region. You don't need ropes to work these vineyards like you do in some parts of the Moselle. You can stroll amongst the vines without worrying about tumbling head first down the hill and finishing up in the river. So they're sandy loam soils as well. It's a much gentler scenery, much gentler climate, warmer, lower rainfall, ideal for ripening Pinot Noir. Now, under Ernie Lewisohn's guidance, Villa Wolf has developed a style of Pinot Noir which emphasizes the purity of the fruit. They are looking at showing off the purity, the ripeness of the fruit. The grapes are hand harvested. Anything that's overripe, anything that's affected with any kind of botrytis is rejected. So only healthy, perfectly ripe berries are selected and picked and carted into the winery. And that's a really lovely Pinot Noir nose. So you've got strawberry fruit again, but a lot more cherry. Sort of sour red cherry character on the nose, and a little bit of oak as well. So you've got 12 months aging in French oak barriques, which gives a sort of smoky, oaky note. Really lovely. And there's also it's a distinct to Pfalz Pinot Noirs within the German Pinot Noir circles anyway. It's a sort of whetstone character, a minerality. So you've got those smoky notes, you've got that lovely red fruit, and a little bit of that whetstone character. That's actually easier to imagine at the moment because it's been raining and I can go outside, sit on the patio and smell the whetstone. Excuse me. So we've got nice juicy fruit character, similar sort of acidity to the Gamay, maybe a little bit more tannin, not a lot more, just a little. This is not whole berry fermented, so the grapes are crushed, allowed to macerate, and then fermented. It's actually quite Villa Wolf, despite the fact that the winery has been modernized and cleaned up since Ernie Lewisohn bought it in the 90s. The wines are made in quite an old-fashioned way, so they're open fermenters. The cap of skins that floats on top of the wine is pushed down manually. They do pump overs as well, which is it is what it sounds like. It's pumping the juice over the cap at the same time as they're pressing the cap down back into the wine to extract more character from the skins. But and it's a natural ferment as well. So they're using the yeasts that bloom, that form on the skins of the grapes, to perform the fermentation. The oak that's used is they use French oak barrels. They are typically 1 or 2 years old. They've been used a couple of vintages. And about a quarter of the barrels are replaced new each year, which is quite a lot of oak content. I mean, we're looking at a wine that's what, £10 a bottle, and you know it's oak aged. It's got lots of character. I think this is fantastic value. We sell Pinot Noirs from about £6-7, starting with a Romanian example, through a couple of Chilean examples to this, and then beyond into, you know, sort of Burgundian Pinot Noirs, and finishing off with just shy of £100 for a decent Grand Cru Burgundy. And this, I mean, this is fabulous for £10, £9.99. You got a penny change, and it's lovely summer drinking. This is looking for a seared tuna steak or a salad niçoise. Absolutely lovely. If you're having it with a salad niçoise, lay off the vinaigrette. You don't need a vinegar dressing if you're looking to have a wine with your dinner, because that's going to fight with the wine. No, that's fantastic. That really is nice. Nick, you've asked what do the Germans export? Generally speaking, they export what we import, what we want to buy from them. So I've been to a number of trade tastings in London in the last 12 months, where I've had the chance to try lots of lovely Rieslings and what have you, and some other sort of more minority grapes like Silvaner and so on. But at every tasting, every German wine tasting I've attended, whether it's put on by a merchant or whether it's a generic body, there's always been somebody banging the gong for Pinot Noir. And the range in quality of Spätburgunder from Germany starts with simpler wines than this Johann Wolf wine that we sell, and extends all the way to Grossgewachs First Estate Pinot Noirs that rivaled the very best of red Burgundy, and they rivaled them in price terms as well. I think if we showed an enthusiasm for the German Pinot Noirs that are available, we'd see more of them come onto the market. We sell 4 Pinot Noirs now at Waitrose. I've got 3 in store. If you like this, there's another one from Louis Guntram, which is about £14, and then we do an absolutely delicious one from Baden, who's the producer's name escapes me for a moment. It'll come back to me, but that's at about 20, 21, 22 pounds. And then at the top end, we've got one of these Grossgewachs First Estate. sort of first growth Pinot Noirs from Louis Guntram, which is only available online on Waitrose Cellar. And that's absolutely amazing wine for less than 40 quid. So there are, okay, less than 40 quid. It's not a Friday night special, but good Burgundy is, you can easily spend £40 and be disappointed. I promise you, this Louis Guntram doesn't let you down. It's a very, very good Pinot Noir, and I think that the more we try these wines, the more we buy these wines, the more we'll see of them. And one of the things that I particularly like about German Spätburgunder, German Pinot Noirs, is that they are more like Burgundy. New World Pinot Noirs they're lovely, don't get me wrong, but they tend to have a citric note. Always reminds me of tangerine peel, which I like, I find attractive, but it's absent in Burgundy. I don't get that same characteristic note in Burgundy. And whether it's from Central Otago in New Zealand, or whether it's from the Willamette Valley in North America, they're not the same. It pains me to say, but I have to compare this Johann Wolf Pinot Noir with the English Pinot Noirs that we can buy at the moment, and we're not quite there in terms of bang for buck. Okay, we produce some great Pinot Noir in this country, particularly in warm vintages like 18 and 19. That really hold their own. They're great wines, but they're in the £15 to £25 bracket, and that's fair because it is literally what it's cost to produce those wines, as well as a reflection of what they're worth on the market. What we don't produce, and I don't think we can at this point in time produce, is a £10 Pinot Noir like this one from Villa Wolf that's got so much flavour and typicity and everything else. And it's a lovely wine served chilled. It works really well because it's got those low tannins and bright acidity and all of that, and the red fruit works really well, still shows really well when the wine's served at that lower temperature. Which brings us to our last red wine, and this one is this is a bit of a left field variety. This is can you see that right? Yeah. This is a Sanso from South Africa, from Stellenbosch. Stellenbosch Manor is a range of wines made by Stellenrust. Stellenrust is one of the older family-owned estates in South Africa. Started in the 1920s and still in the same family hands as it was back then. The Sanso for this wine was planted in the 1960s, 1964. And they're old bush vines. If you're talking about South African wine, you hear about bush vines a lot in connection with the white variety Chenin Blanc. Not so much around the red grapes. If you're looking in Europe, you'll hear a lot about bush vine Grenache in the south of France, old vines. When we describe them as bush vines, they're not left to just grow wild. They are trained, but in what the French would call a goblet style. So you'll have two spurs trained off the vine that are brought round to meet each other at the top, and so when the growth occurs around the vine, it looks like a goblet. It looks like what it is, a bush. And these vines grown this way, not so popular these days, for the principal reason that they're very manual in terms of care and attention. You can't prune these vines by machine. You can't harvest these vines by machine. You can't thin the canopy using a machine. You've got to go in there and manually trim everything. And some of these old bush vines are not even planted in rows. They're en fou. They're all over the place. Very sort of random plantings. And indeed, some of the vines will be grown on their own roots, and new vines will be grown by taking a sucker from one of the original vines and plant. It's a bit like propagating strawberries. This is how vines used to be propagated before phylloxera, an insect, caused such devastation in France and Europe, and then eventually the whole world, really, and caused a change in the way that vines are grown and propagated. So this is old vine Sanso. Sanso in South Africa is probably best known as being one of the two parents of Pinotage. Sanso's the Hermitage in the Pinotage, and it was crossed with Pinot Noir. So you've got these two great varieties brought together to produce Pinotage. And I've got to be honest with you, on the whole, I much prefer Sanso and Pinot Noir to their offspring. I'm not a big fan of Pinotage. I can think of one or two nice examples. We started off this series of tastings actually with a really nice South African Pinotage when we did an evening of South African wines. But this is it's a rare example of South African Sanso, because the grape variety is usually used for blending. It turns up a lot in rosé. It's very seldom presented on its own. We've got a Chilean example of Sanso on the shelf at work as well. I was tempted to show the Chilean Sanso tonight, but when I investigated, it turned out that mine was the only store selling it, and online, which would have rather restricted your ability to access it if you can't get into Oxford Street. So I went with this South African example because it's in about 200 stores at the moment, which means that a lot more people can get hold of it. The irony is, of course, that my store's not one of them, so I had to buy this. I had to buy this from another Waitrose in order to taste it. I couldn't bring it home from work. But it's you can see from the colour, it's pale like the other two wines are pale. It's got a slightly deeper, dare I say, warmer nose, if that makes sense. The fruits are a little bit darker than they are with the Gamay and the Pinot Noir. And this is made in a very traditional old school method, cold maceration. So the grapes are taken in at the winery, they're crushed, and then the juice is left to macerate with the skins for 2 days before the fermentation starts. So, and the fermentation is a combination of wild ferment, but they also introduce a strain of yeast that was cultivated in the Rhone Valley, and so they're using a Rhone yeast in open concrete tanks, and to keep the juice in contact with the skins, they've got manual punch down, pushing the cap down, no pump over in this case. Very old school winemaking. Lots of red cherry fruit, quite an earthy character. Little bit of oak there. It's matured for 16 months in oak. About 10% of the barrels are new, but the rest is second and third fill French oak. So there's a little bit of oak character there. It doesn't overwhelm the fruit at all. It's quite subtle. The tannins are really silky. Mm. It's quite gentle, and it's the just over 13% alcohol. It's the most alcoholic of the three wines tonight. Um, but you're not getting the sort of heat that you would get from that warmer alcohol. Um, Peppery, yes, I agree, Nick. It's there's like a little twist of black pepper in the glass. And it's got, yeah, it has got that sort of warmth to it, the sort of slightly darker fruits, more into the cherry, less the sort of raspberry strawberry character. um, mm. But again, this is a wine. These wines have warmed up a little bit now because it's been 45 minutes since I started, and they came out of the fridge about 5 minutes before that, and they'd only been in the fridge for an hour. Um, and I'm starting to think that actually I'd like this wine a little cooler than it is right now. Um, this has got a bit more bite, a bit more warmth about it, darker fruits. So maybe we could push the envelope in terms of food and start to look at uh, barbecued meats. Certainly would work with lamb. I don't know. I don't know how people feel about this. I often find that, particularly on a hot afternoon, you're you're you're, you're barbecuing something really tasty. You've got a nice steak. You've got some lamb chops. You've got all these great barbecued flavours. And what are you going to drink with that? You've got big, heavy butch reds, Australian Shiraz, California Merlot, or Bordeaux blends, and you've got these big flavours, and the flavours certainly work. But I've got to be honest, I'm not a fan of the big alcohol in the sun in the afternoon. Um, if you're barbecuing into the evening and it's getting cooler, then yes, bring out the bigger reds. But if it's earlier in the day and you've got you've got the barbecue on, and you've got these lovely flavours. You want something that's gonna partner it. You want something that's got a nice kick of flavour, but without the alcohol, and maybe without the tannin. Something that you can chill, that you can appreciate more in the sunshine, that and that doesn't give you a banging headache before 6:30. And these wines, all sort of sub 13 or 13, so certainly sub 13.5%. It's considered low alcohol in wine terms these days. They fit the bill because you can stick them in an ice bucket, you can stick them in the fridge, and they're absolutely lovely with sort of barbecued food. And this Sanso is possibly the best of the three for that sort of barbecue scenario. Nick, you're not going to have a lamb chop in the afternoon. Yeah, fair enough. But it's when you've got you know, people round, and it's a warm day and the barbecue's out, and you've got everything from burgers and sausage. Let's face it, most people don't put one thing on the barbecue. It's usually a smorgasbord of grilled, charcoaled meats. What do they call them? Offerings to the god, burnt offerings. And you don't necessarily want the sort of big alcoholic wines to accompany them. Something that's got the flavour to match would be something like that Sansa. At the same time, if you're serving up a salad and you want a lighter red, a fresher red, something that you can put in the ice bucket, something made with Gamay. It doesn't have to be Temata's Gamay Noir, of course. I just picked that to be awkward and go for a New Zealand example. But this is the great variety of Beaujolais. There aren't that many. In fact, I can count on one hand the number of New World Gamays that I've had that I thought were any good, and the Temata is easily the best of them. But if you're looking for that style of wine, then Beaujolais is the place to look, and Cru Beaujolais if you want to spend a few quid more. But Cru Beaujolais, amazing value. You get the greatest wines of Beaujolais for less than the price of basic village wines from Burgundy. If you've got £15 to £20 to spend, and you want something in the style of Pinot Noir, Burgundy, and you've got a French selection in front of you, I promise you'll get more bang for your buck from Beaujolais, because you're looking at the top end, than you will do from Burgundy, where really you're looking at entry-level wines in that price point today. Beaujolais, especially during the summer, especially during hot weather, especially if you want to serve the wine chilled, Beaujolais is the way to go. Unless you've got a bottle of Temata Gamay to hand. And when you're looking at Pinot Noir, don't overlook these amazing wines from Germany, because, as I say, a third of Germany's production is red. Amazing. How much of it do we see? Not a lot. If we want to see more of it, and I think we should, particularly if we want to give the Burgundians a fright, then we need to be importing and buying more German Pinot Noir and encouraging them. And they're great value for money. We have the £10 Johann Wolf. I'm not sure which of these wines is my favourite tonight. I think I've come across elements in all three of them that I really like. The South African Sanso I love for its sheer bloody obscurity, and the fact that it ticks so many boxes. It's a really versatile wine. I love the Temata because I like Gamay, I love Beaujolais, and for years I've tried New World Gamays that just you wonder why they even bothered. But I'm glad that they did at Temata, because there aren't that many lower in alcohol, lighter in body red wines from the New World. If you're looking for that style of wine from Italy, you've got the wines of Valpolicella and Bardolino up in the north. Watch out for the Ripasso versions, because they are much heavier wines and typically 14.5% alcohol. And lovely full-bodied wines they are, but that might not be what you're looking for if you're looking to chill the red. So a basic Valpolicella or Bardolino, which is still going to cost you considerably less than £10 at the moment, and better made every year. Every time I try them, I'm more impressed by them. But otherwise, you're looking. The French do it so well with Beaujolais, and with the Pinot Noirs from, well, not just from Burgundy. You can get great Pinot Noir from Alsace and southern France now as well. So there's lots of these lighter-bodied, medium-bodied red wines coming out of France, coming out of Italy, coming out of Germany. But where's the New World equivalent? And they are few and far between. So I really like the Timata for that, for doing it so well, and for flying the flag for these sort of lighter, more medium-bodied style of wines. Ed's favourite is the Stellenbosch. We've got a couple of people who got hands up for the Johann Wolf. I can get that. Yeah, and I'm with you, Carl. I think, you know, Cru Beaujolais is superb. You know, what price the best wines from Beaujolais. I mean, even pushing the envelope for something that's got a few years bottle age, £25. That's the kind of the top end. It's really hard to spend more than that on Beaujolais. It really is. Does the order of tasting influence our choices? Yes, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. It's yeah, and Timata. Yeah, it is lovely, and it is. One of the great things about doing a tasting like this is that we've all of us, those of us who've got the 3 wines, or you know, or 2 or more, is that we can go back and try them in a different order. And when I'm doing sort of hardcore comparative tasting, and I'm really trying to get to the bottom of a wine, to really get to grips with it, what I tend to do is I'll have 4 or 5 or 6 wines lined up, and I will go backwards and forwards between them. And it's the same with spirits as well. I find it as revealing to go backwards through the order once we've, you know, say finished a structured tasting, and to try them out in a different order, and to see what I think again. So, you know, later on I'll maybe go back and you know, have a glass of the Cinsault, and you know, really get to know the wine. Same with the Timata, the Johann Wolf. But yes, it's great to mix things up, and I've done a lot of sort of structured tastings where we've sat there with between 6 and a dozen wines on a tasting mat, and well, in glasses on a tasting mat. Obviously we don't put the wine on a mat, but I say to people at the start, don't drink it all. Yeah, have a little sip, have a taste as we go through in the order we're going to go through, but leave enough that you can go back to the glass and try it again later. That you can see, you know, oh, that wine number 5 reminds me of wine number 1. Let's pick up wine number 1 and see if it really does smell the same way. And you can play around like that, and that's a lot of the fun. I've got a great job. Yeah, I do love my job. I have to say so. I do love my job. Carl, you're drinking Priorat. Wow. Kind of the, I mean, wonderful wines, but really not the sort of stuff you should, you know, chill down to 10 degrees and serve up in a hot temperature. It's probably more, yeah, it's probably more appropriate to the weather that we're suffering at the moment. But yeah, look, I'm going to start boring people if I go on for much longer. It's been wonderful to share these 3 wines with you. If you've joined in halfway through, or you want to watch this again, Facebook will make this available, bless them, after about, it takes them about 20 minutes to compile it, and you can watch it again if you want to. But these 3 wines, they're all of them available from Waitrose, of course. It's who I work for, and 2 of the 3 are available in the John Lewis Food Hall on Oxford Street, which is where I work. I'm hoping that we'll be getting back to a semblance of normal going forward, and that we'll be able to run live tastings in the food hall again. But even when we do, I have been challenged by customers in the last few weeks to carry on screening this stuff online. We've had ex-customers of the food hall chime in to say how much they've enjoyed either the wines or the tastings, which I'm humbled by, but to comment from countries like Canada and South Africa and Australia, which is amazing. And we've got people joining in from Scotland and Wales, and that's amazing as well. So we're going to try and keep some of this content going online, and for the foreseeable future anyway, we're going to carry on doing these tastings every couple of weeks, because I don't see things changing anytime soon in terms of being allowed to do tastings in store and large gatherings. I certainly can't see us getting 80 to 100 people into the wine bar again, shoulder to shoulder, trying these wines. Something I'm looking at is to put together webinars using Zoom. I'm studying this topic. I'm not the IT guy at work, and I'm not the best person to explore these things, but as a group, as a company, we're looking at involving winemakers, so we can get to the stage where we run these things like a webinar, perhaps just talking about one iconic wine, getting a winemaker to talk about the wine, to talk about how they got into wine, how they make wine, their philosophy of wine, and it would be more along the sort of lines of an interview. So it would be myself or one of my colleagues interviewing a winemaker, talking about their wine, and you can buy that one wine rather than 3 wines and listen to me talk about 3 wines. It'd be much more interesting perhaps to listen to a winemaker instead. So we're exploring that avenue too. If you're not on our mailing list, you can drop me an email at winespecialist.oxford.street at johnlewis.co.uk. That's winespecialist, all one word, .oxford.street at johnlewis.co.uk, or you can email me direct, andy.evans at waitrose.co.uk, and I'll add you to our mailing list just to make sure that you're in on the loop for any of the live tastings we do in the wine bar, as well as these things that we're doing online. Yeah, we'll keep doing these tastings. They're a lot of fun to set up. If anybody's got any suggestions about the sort of wines they'd like to see me talk about, the sort of wines that they'd like to try or know more about, then let me know in the comments, because I'm open to suggestions, and my imagination only goes so far, so I really appreciate the help in coming up with future themes. But it's been a lot of fun. Thank you ever so much for joining in, and I really hope you've enjoyed the wines. Thank you and good night.